currently work as a researcher at Pathways to Care, which is a mental health project that aims to increase access to mental health care for Black children, youth, and their families across the province of Ontario. And so that's really the work that I do. I'm really passionate about health equity, access to healthcare systems and mental health care, and working with African, Caribbean, and Black communities. In terms of seeing anti-Black racism play out in my life and in my communities, I like to think of myself as somebody who had a childhood where I experienced so many different experiences within Blackness in a short period of time. I was somebody who was born in Jane and Finch in the Driftwood area, and so that was a really significant part of my life for a very long time until my family's, moved to Pickering, which is a suburb of Toronto. And so I really did, move there and experience, being a child where you're like one of the few Black people in the classroom, and really experiencing that and experiencing, people's expectations of you being very different from the expectations of your peers. And that was the first time I'd ever really been confronted with that. And that kind of continued on until I went to university. But, my family also has strong roots in a town called Stratford. They're one of the few families that immigrated and settled there in the 70s. And so I saw through these three places, one that was, very much based in the city, one that was suburban, and one that I could describe it as rural. Anti-Blackness really weaved a thread through all of the experiences of my family in all of these different places. And so as a child, I started to put those pieces together to say, okay, something is going on here with the way that we're being treated in all these different places. It's showing up in different ways, but the effect and the impact is the same. And so that really started to get the wheels turning in terms of understanding how anti-Black racism works. But I don't think it really hit home for me until I saw my grandmother go through the healthcare system. I was a little bit older, and then that really hit home for me how anti-Blackness can impact health and well-being. I have been very lucky to have worked in settings with mentors who were Black, and who really did uplift the work that I wanted to do with Black communities. That was both as an undergraduate student, a graduate student, and in my early career. And so I'm incredibly lucky to work for an organization now that really does prioritize Black people and Black communities. And so I've had to do very little personal advocacy for myself in my immediate workspaces, because those spaces are very healthy and affirming spaces for me. I have, however, witnessed in our workings with other organizations that harm can be done when they don't or won't try to understand us and our communities and the things that impact us. In terms of a example that I can think of, in terms of where my understanding of Black communities has come into play, is certainly in the work that I do now. So again, not a lot of personal experience and personal advocating, because my workplace is a very healthy one. But in terms of us thinking about our project and the way that we wanted to do it, I was definitely able to bring my knowledge and experience in working with communities as a student into the work that we're doing now, the kind of care and trust building that is needed to have a really successful project. Community members are really aware of how extractive research projects can be. And the project that I do work on, Pathways to Care, is a research and implementation project. And so for communities, they know that sometimes people will come in, you do some work with them, you talk to them, and then you never hear back from that researcher again. So knowing this from the previous work that I did as a student, I was really able to provide some insight into how to design a project that could keep communities in mind and to ensure that our concerns are being addressed, and making sure that spaces were safe for us as well. Because we're talking about a subject around mental health that's really taboo in our communities. And I know how communities think about it, speak about it, and have been impacted in terms of racism and how it affects mental health. So understanding anti-Black racism, how it works, has really been able to make us, be really intentional about our project and what we hope to do. Having that previous experience to bring in really does allow us to make something that has an end result that benefits communities first. It's not just research focused, and really working with communities to do these things together. That's the kind of perspective that I was able to bring to the knowledge that I gained. And I think in order to talk about the benefits of research, I think we have to also acknowledge the harms. For a really, really long time, research around health and well-being as my focus has been harmful to Black communities. We've had We've been pathologizing communities for a very, very long time. And so research has gone hand in hand with oppression, particularly in the health space. We were literally creating diseases around very normal reactions to being oppressed. The example I always pull up is like drapetomania, and that's like a disease of slaves running away from their masters. That's a perfectly reasonable response, but science has really couched and advanced and reified anti-Black racism, and so now in this space, research has a real opportunity to be the other side of that equation. Research has the ability to confront anti-Black racism in healthcare, to recognize and understand the history in Canada, the history of anti-Black racism in this country. And I always think it's always about the power of a story. I think for a lot of Black Canadians, the story of our history in Canada would be so different without the role of researchers, whether that be historians, sociologists, biologists, to really counter the narrative of what it means to be Black in Canada. And so Black people are so integral to the Canadian story. We're not add-ons. And so I think research is really huge there. In terms of the work that I do, healthcare can be an extremely racist and dangerous place for Black folks. But I think a lot of people wouldn't believe communities, wouldn't understand where communities are coming from if that wasn't backed up by the research. I wish it wasn't that way, but the truth is that is the way that the world responds to things. And so in this last year alone, we've seen how medical communities have had to confront inherent anti-Black racism within the medical system. We've taken out like the use of EGFR in nephrology, and we've had a focus on, Black dermatology and what illnesses look like on Black skin. And so none of that would get that push, I think, without, the research to back it up.